day, my children threw me out of my own home. I learned that blood doesn't always make a family. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 69 years old, a widow, and until one terrible afternoon, I believed I had done everything right as a mother. For 40 years, my husband Daniel and I built a life together. We raised 3 children, Emily, Brian, and Michael, in a beautiful 2-story house. Every birthday, every Christmas morning, every family dinner happened inside those walls. I thought that house held love. I didn't realize it only held memories. After Daniel passed away from a heart attack, everything changed at first. My children seemed incredibly supportive. Emily visited every weekend. Brian handled my bills. Michael called almost every night to check on me. Looking back, I realized they weren't taking care of me. They were preparing to take everything I owned. One Sunday, Brian arrived carrying a folder. "Mom," he said warmly, "Dad always handled the legal stuff. We just want to make sure everything is organized if something ever happens." I trusted my son without question. He pointed to several places for me to sign. I didn't read every page. Why would I? He was my son. That single mistake cost me everything. Months later, I overheard Emily talking on the phone. "We'll probably sell it for around $900,000. Sell what?" Then I heard her laugh. "Mom won't be living there much longer." My heart stopped. I confronted them that evening. "What are you talking about?" Brian sighed as though I were being unreasonable. "The house legally belongs to the 3 of us now." "What?" "You transferred ownership." "I never agreed to that." "You signed the papers." My hands began shaking. I thought those were emergency documents. Michael finally spoke. "You should have read them." That sentence hurt more than anything. Not because it was true, because it came from my own child. Over the next few weeks, they pressured me to move into an assisted facility. I wasn't sick. I still drove. I cooked. I gardened. I paid my own bills. But none of that mattered. The house had become worth more than I was. One rainy afternoon, Emily placed a suitcase beside the front door. "The retirement community is expecting you." "I'm not leaving." Brian looked uncomfortable. "You don't have a choice. I built this home. You don't own it anymore." Those words echoed through my mind as the front door closed behind me. No hugs, no goodbye, no tears, just silence. I spent my first night on a church bench. I wasn't crying because I'd lost a house. I was crying because I'd lost my family the next morning. A woman named Helen found me sitting outside. She handed me a hot cup of coffee. "You look like someone who thinks her life is over." I forced a smile. "It probably is." Helen laughed softly. "No, dear. Sometimes life has to fall apart before it becomes something beautiful." She invited me to stay at a small community center where she volunteered. I planned to stay one night. I stayed 3 months. During that time, I helped cook meals for seniors, organized donations, and listened to stories from people who had survived things far worse than I had. Slowly, I began smiling again. One afternoon, Helen introduced me to a man named Robert. He owned a small furniture restoration business. "We need someone organized," he said. "I haven't worked in years. So, I'm almost 70. So, I don't know anything about furniture." Robert smiled. "I need honesty more than experience." I accepted the job. It changed my life. I discovered I loved restoring old furniture, watching broken tables and worn-out chairs become beautiful again reminded me that people could heal too. Business grew quickly. Robert trusted me enough to make me a partner. Within 8 months, we were receiving orders from luxury hotels and interior designers. For the first time in decades, I wasn't someone's wife, or someone's mother. I was simply Margaret, and I was happy. 1 year after my children threw me out, I purchased a small cottage overlooking a lake. Nothing fancy, just peace. Every morning, I drank coffee on the porch while birds sang around me. I hadn't heard from my children once. Not a birthday card, not a phone call. Nothing. Then one Saturday morning, someone knocked on my front door. I opened it. Emily stood there, behind her were Brian and Michael. They looked exhausted, older, nervous. Emily burst into tears. Mom, I stared without speaking. Brian finally cleared his throat. We need to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What do you want? Emily looked ashamed. We made a terrible mistake. I waited. The housing market crashed. Brian continued. The buyer backed out. Michael looked down. We borrowed against the house, Emily whispered. Now we're drowning in debt. I finally understood they weren't here because they missed me. They needed money. Brian took a deep breath. We heard your business is successful. There it was, the truth. We were hoping he couldn't finish. Emily did that you could help us? I looked at the 3 people I had once loved more than my own life. A year earlier, I would have given them everything. Now, I simply felt tired. Do you know what hurt the most? None of them answered. It wasn't losing my house. It wasn't sleeping on a church bench. It wasn't starting over at 69. It was realizing my children only remembered I existed when they needed something. Emily began sobbing. We're sorry. Are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because you need me? Silence. That silence told me everything. I invited them inside. Anyway, hope appeared on their faces. Maybe they thought forgiveness would come with a check. I served coffee. Sat around my dining table. Then I walked to a cabinet and returned carrying an old photo album. One by one, I opened photographs. Emily's first bicycle. Brian graduating college. Michael catching his first fish. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. I pointed to every picture. Do you remember these days? All 3 nodded through tears. I do too. I remember working double shifts so you could have braces. I remember selling my jewelry to pay your tuition. I remember skipping meals when money was tight. I never kept score because parents aren't supposed to. I closed the album, but children are supposed to. Remember, the room was silent, except for Emily crying. Finally, Brian whispered, we don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. But carrying hate is another prison. I walked to the window. When you threw me out, I lost my children, but I found myself. They begged me for financial help. I refused, not because I wanted revenge. Because saving them from the consequences would teach them nothing. Instead, I handed Brian the business card of a financial counselor. I gave Emily information about a company hiring nurses. I offered Michael a recommendation for honest work at Robert's workshop. I'll help you rebuild your lives. But I won't buy them back. They cried harder than before leaving. Emily hugged me. It was the first real hug she'd given me in years. I'm so ashamed, I know. Brian whispered. We love you. I smiled sadly. I hope someday you learn that love isn't something you say when you're desperate. It's something you prove every day. They walked away together. I watched until their car disappeared. People often ask if I ever spoke to my children. Again, yes, slowly, carefully, trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. It took years. Birthdays, phone, calls, apologies followed by changed behavior, not empty promises. Real change, eventually. They stopped asking for money. They started asking for time that was worth far more today. My grandchildren visit my little cottage every summer. They know the story not because I wanted them to hate their parents, but because I wanted them to understand something important. Never measure someone's worth by what they own one day. The strongest person in your life may become the most vulnerable when that day comes. Choose kindness. Because homes can be rebuilt, fortunes can be earned again, but the trust of a loving parent, once broken, may never be the same. Not moral. Never trade the love of your parents for money. Wealth comes and goes, but the blessing of those who sacrificed everything for you is priceless. Karma has a way of teaching lessons that no amount of money can erase.